It was an unusually quiet morning at the cemetery, the kind of stillness that seemed to weigh heavy on the air. The triplets, Mia, Ella, and Lily, dressed in matching red dresses, walked hand in hand through the lush green grass, their small shoes making soft imprints as they moved forward. They had visited their mother's grave countless times since her passing, each visit a somber ritual of remembrance. But today, something felt different. It was as though the air itself held a secret, a tension that neither of them could quite place. The cemetery, typically a place of calm, now felt strangely unsettling. The usual comforting silence was replaced by an eerie quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The triplets looked around, their innocent faces filled with curiosity. They had come to visit their mother, to place fresh flowers on her grave, and say their usual goodbyes. But as they walked closer to the stone that marked their mother's resting place, they saw a man kneeling beside it, his back turned to them. At first, they thought nothing of it. It wasn't uncommon for people to visit the cemetery, but something about this man stood out. He was dressed in an expensive blue suit, too formal for a place like this, where most people came dressed in casual clothing. His posture was stiff, as if he was struggling with something deep inside. The man seemed to be lost in thought, his head bowed in silent mourning or contemplation. But there was an intensity in the way he stared at the gravestone. It was a look the girls had never seen before, one of pain, longing, and perhaps regret. Mia, the oldest of the three, hesitated. She squeezed Ella and Lily's hands, her heart beating a little faster. Something didn't feel right. The man didn't seem like someone they had ever seen before. Who was he? And why was he at their mother's grave? For a brief moment, the three girls exchanged glances, each of them feeling an inexplicable pull towards this stranger. They felt a sense of familiarity, as though there was some connection they couldn't quite put their finger on. As they got closer, the man stood up slowly, almost as though he had sensed their presence. His movements were deliberate, careful, as if he was uncertain about how to react. When he finally turned around, his eyes met theirs. For a split second, there was a moment of shock, both on his face and in theirs. The triplets froze in place, staring at him with wide eyes. There was something about him, something that made their hearts race, though they couldn't explain why. The man's face was a mixture of surprise and recognition, as though he too had been waiting for this moment, though he hadn't expected it to happen like this. His jaw tightened, and his hand, which had been resting on the gravestone, slowly dropped to his side. He cleared his throat, trying to compose himself, but the emotions were evident in his eyes. There was a storm inside him, a deep sadness, but also something else, something they couldn't understand. "What are you doing here?" Mia finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly as she tugged on her sister's hands. The question was innocent, but it carried an undertone of confusion and unease. The triplets had never seen this man before, and yet there was something strangely familiar about him. They couldn't put it into words, but they all felt it. The man took a deep breath, his face softening as he looked at the girls. "This is my wife's grave," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. The triplets blinked, still unsure of what to make of his words. Their mother had passed away when they were just babies, and they knew little about her past. All they had were the memories their mother had left them with, the stories she had shared about her life, but no details about a man, no mention of a father. The man's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he continued, I never got the chance to be here for her, for you. I didn't know about you girls." His voice trailed off, as though the weight of the words had finally caught up with him. The triplets looked at each other, the words echoing in their minds. He didn't know about them. What did that mean? Their mother had never spoken of a father. They had always thought they were alone, with only their mother to guide them through life. The idea of a father seemed foreign, like a dream they never even dared to have. The girls stood motionless, their young minds racing with questions. Who was this man? Why was he saying these things? And why had he never been there for them? The air was thick with uncertainty, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. They had so many questions, but no answers. For a moment, they simply stood there, taking in the strange man before them, unsure of what the future would hold. The stage was set. The mysterious encounter had only just begun, and the triplets were about to learn a truth that would change their lives forever. The man stood silently for a moment, as if the weight of his own words had left him breathless. He gazed down at the gravestone, then back at the triplets, his eyes clouded with regret and sorrow. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the emotions he had kept buried for so long. The triplets stood in front of him, their faces filled with confusion and curiosity, unsure of what to make of the situation. They were too young to fully understand, but something in the air told them that their world was about to change forever. Mia, Ella, and Lily exchanged nervous glances, their hearts racing with unanswered questions. Why had this man said those words? He didn't look like anyone they knew, yet there was something about him, something that tugged at the very core of their being. Mia, the oldest, instinctively stepped forward, her small voice quivering as she spoke again. "Who are you?" she asked, her words heavy with doubt. "And why are you here?" The man's eyes softened as he knelt down to their level, his face full of emotion. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, before his voice broke the silence. "I'm your father," he said, his words coming out in a whisper barely audible over the rustling of the wind. The triplets froze. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Their eyes widened in disbelief. And for a moment, none of them could speak. Their hearts pounded in their chests, and 1,000 thoughts raced through their minds. "Father," Mia whispered, her voice barely a breath. "But we don't have a father." The man nodded slowly, his eyes welling up with tears. "I know," he said softly. "You don't remember me. I've been gone for so long, and I've missed so much of your lives. But I'm here now. I'm here for you." His words were filled with pain and regret, but also a deep, undeniable longing. His eyes lingered on each of the triplets, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the love and connection he had longed for, even though he knew it might be too late. The triplets stared at him in stunned silence, their young minds struggling to process what he had just said. For as long as they could remember, their mother had been everything to them. She was the one who had raised them, cared for them, and loved them without question. She had never once spoken of a father, and they had never thought to ask. The idea of a father, someone they had never known, seemed like an impossibility. The only family they had ever known was their mother, and now, here was a man claiming to be their father. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The man's eyes filled with tears, and he reached out a trembling hand, trying to offer some form of comfort to the girls. "I never wanted to leave you," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. I wasn't there when you needed me. And for that, I will never forgive myself. But I've spent every day of my life thinking about you three, wondering what you were doing, hoping you were happy. I had to stay away. I didn't know how to come back, how to face you. I thought I had lost you forever." Mia's eyes filled with tears as well, but she was still in shock. She couldn't understand. Her heart was torn between the desire to believe him and the deep, unshakable feeling that this couldn't be true. "Why didn't you come sooner?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you try to find us?" The man's face twisted with guilt. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I was afraid that you wouldn't want me. I thought that you would hate me for not being there. And I couldn't bear the thought of seeing you and knowing how much I had failed you. But now, standing here with you, I realize that I should have tried. I should have been there. I know I've missed so much, but I want to make things right. I want to be the father you deserve." Ella and Lily, still holding on to each other, looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they could feel the sincerity in his voice. His words, though painful, seemed genuine. They weren't sure how to react, but they instinctively sensed that this man, this stranger, wasn't just anyone. He was their father. But could they really trust him? Could they really accept someone they had never known? The man wiped his eyes, trying to regain some composure, but his emotions were clearly overwhelming him. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want the chance to prove to you that I'm here. And I want to be part of your lives. I want to make up for all the time we lost." The triplets stood in silence, still processing everything. Their world had just been turned upside down, and they were unsure of what to think or how to feel. But one thing was certain: their lives would never be the same again. The moment the man had revealed the truth about who he was, everything had changed for the triplets. Mia, Ella, and Lily were no longer just three little girls visiting their mother's grave. They were standing in front of a man who claimed to be their father, a man they had never known and who, until now, had only existed as an unknown figure in their imaginations. The air around them seemed thick with confusion and unspoken words. Their world had tilted on its axis, and now they had to figure out how to make sense of it all. Mia, always the more thoughtful one, was the first to speak after a long, uncomfortable silence. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She clutched her sister's hands tighter, as if trying to ground herself in something familiar. "How could you be our father? We don't know you." The man, still kneeling on the grass, looked at her with tears in his eyes. His heart broke seeing the hurt in her innocent eyes, but he understood her confusion. After all, how could they possibly accept him as their father when he had been absent for so long? He had no right to expect their trust right away. "I know it's hard to believe," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to be a stranger to you. I know I've missed so much, and I can't change the past. But I want to make up for all the years I wasn't here. I want to be part of your lives, if you'll let me." Ella, the middle triplet, looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "You really are our father?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "But why didn't you come sooner? Why didn't you come when we were little?" The man's heart ached at the question. He had asked himself the same thing countless times. How could he explain to these sweet little girls that he had been too afraid to face them? How could he explain the years of regret that weighed him down? His lips trembled as he struggled for the right words. "I wasn't strong enough to face you," he admitted quietly, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I thought you might hate me. I thought that coming back after so many years would only hurt you more. But now I realize how wrong I was. I should have fought harder to be with you. I should have tried sooner." Lily, the youngest of the triplets, stood quietly by her sisters. Her big brown eyes studied the man carefully, as if trying to make sense of everything. Her innocent expression held no judgment, only confusion. "If you're our dad," she said softly, "why didn't Mommy ever talk about you?" The man's breath caught in his throat. The question cut deeper than he expected. He had always wondered why his wife had kept him a secret from their children, but now, faced with his daughters, he couldn't answer her question. He had no excuse. He could only offer his regrets. "I don't have an answer for that, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick. "I'm so sorry that you grew up without knowing about me. I don't know why your mother chose not to talk about me. I can't change that, but I can promise you that I'll never leave you again. I want to be the father you deserve." Mia, Ella, and Lily looked at each other, the weight of his words settling heavily between them. They had spent their whole lives believing that their mother was all they needed. She had been their rock, their world. And now this man, this stranger, was telling them that he was their father. Could they really accept him into their hearts after all these years? The idea of a father had always been a distant thought, something that didn't seem real. But here he was, standing in front of them, his eyes filled with hope and regret. The silence stretched on, And in that silence, the triplets struggled with their emotions. They felt a mix of anger, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness. They had always longed for a father, but they had never expected it to happen like this. They wanted to believe him, to believe that this man truly was their father. But how could they? He had been absent for their entire lives, and now he expected them to just accept him. It didn't feel right. Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She turned to the man, her face a mixture of anger and hurt. "You don't just get to walk back into our lives like nothing happened," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of her words. "We can't just forget everything. We've been alone for so long." The man's heart broke at the sharpness in her voice, but he knew she was right. He had no right to expect them to forget the years of absence. He had no right to expect them to accept him without question. He had to earn their trust, and that would take time. "I know," he said softly, his voice full of regret. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect everything to be okay. But I promise you, I'll be here, no matter how long it takes. I'll show you that I'm not going anywhere. I'll prove to you that I can be the father you need." The triplets didn't respond right away. Instead, they stood there in silence, processing the man's words, trying to make sense of the emotions they were feeling. They wanted to believe him, but the pain of their mother's absence was still too fresh, and the idea of letting someone into their lives who had been absent for so long felt impossible. But as they stood there, something shifted. It was subtle, but it was there. Slowly, they began to realize that perhaps, just maybe, they didn't have to shut him out completely. Maybe, in time, they could find a way to let him in. The struggle for acceptance had only just begun, but it was a struggle they were willing to face together. As the silence stretched on, the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. The triplets stood in front of the man, their hearts still filled with uncertainty. There was so much they didn't understand, so many unanswered questions swirling in their young minds. They had come to the graveyard seeking comfort and closure, not expecting their lives to change forever. But now, standing before the man who claimed to be their father, they had to confront emotions they had never anticipated. Mia, the oldest, was the first to break the silence. Her eyes were still wet with tears, and her voice quivered slightly as she spoke. "I don't know if I can forgive you for not being here all these years," she admitted, her voice filled with pain. "Mommy was our everything. She never told us about you, and we grew up thinking we didn't need a father. I don't know if I can just let you back in." The man, still kneeling before them, listened with a heart full of remorse. He understood her pain. He had caused it. The years of absence, the silence between them, had left a deep scar in his soul. But he had no excuses, no way to erase the hurt he had caused. All he could do was try to show them that he was here now, and that he would do everything in his power to make up for lost time. "I know," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't change the past, Mia. But I'm here now, and I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make it right. I'll never leave you again. I promise." Ella, who had been standing quietly beside her sisters, finally spoke up. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said, her hands clasped tightly together. "I don't know how to feel. You've been gone for so long. I don't know how to trust you." The man's heart broke again, but he nodded in understanding. Trust wasn't something that could be given easily. It had to be earned. And he knew it would take time to rebuild that trust, to prove to his daughters that he was here for good. "I understand," he replied gently. "And I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I'll wait for as long as it takes. I just want you to know that I love you, and I'm here now. We don't have to rush anything. We can take it one step at a time." Lily, the youngest of the triplets, had been quietly watching the exchange, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and wonder. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could feel the sincerity in the man's voice. There was something about him, something that made her want to believe that he was telling the truth. She tugged gently on Mia's sleeve, looking up at her with big, trusting eyes. "Mia, maybe we can give him a chance," Lily said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "He seems like he really wants to be with us." Mia looked down at her younger sister, her heart softening at the sight of Lily's innocent trust. Mia had always been the protector, the one who kept her sisters safe from the world. But now, Lily's simple words made her pause. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go of the pain and fear. Maybe it was time to let someone in. Mia took a deep breath and looked at the man, her heart heavy with a mixture of emotions. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the same eyes that were filled with regret, but also hope. He wasn't perfect. He couldn't undo the past, but he was here, standing before them, offering something they had never had. A chance to start over. A chance for a new beginning. "We'll try," Maya said, her voice strong yet filled with vulnerability. "We'll give you a chance, but it's going to take time. We can't just forget everything that's happened." The man's face lit up with relief, and a tear slipped down his cheek as he nodded. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I will never take that for granted. I will prove to you, every day, that I'm here for you. I'll be the father you deserve." Ella and Lily, still unsure but beginning to trust in the possibility of a new beginning, slowly nodded in agreement. The triplets had always been a tight-knit team, and even though their world had been turned upside down, they were still in this together. They had their mother's love, and now maybe they could begin to let this man into their hearts as well. The man stood up, and for the first time, he opened his arms wide, inviting the triplets into a hug. Hesitant at first, the girls slowly stepped toward him. Mia, Ella, and Lily each reached out, and in that moment, they found something unexpected. The man's embrace was warm, filled with love, and a deep desire to make up for the years lost. It wasn't the perfect reunion they had imagined, but it was a start, a fragile but hopeful beginning. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the cemetery, the triplets stood together in the man's arms. The future, once so uncertain, now seemed filled with possibility. They didn't know what the road ahead would look like, but they knew one thing for sure. They were no longer alone. Together, they would heal. Together, they would start anew. And together, they would build the family they had always dreamed of, piece by piece. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a journey they were willing to take. The heartwarming reunion was only the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one full of love, forgiveness, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.